right. So a common question we've gotten in the last couple of weeks or so has been with regards to regulation and our pivot from US market to the European market. A question from our moderator back. Is the current move away from obtaining US licenses due to regulatory climate something new? Or was it already decided when we had the last question and answer? And is there a timeline with regards to something releasing by the end of quarter two? In the broadest terms, does our pivot from obtaining US licenses to European licenses affect timelines with regards to releasing anything?
So, broadly speaking, we kept tabs on the kind of regulatory landscape from, since almost the beginning in various respect. But, up until recently in the last 6 to 12 months, as we kind of began to see where things were going in many kind of areas, we started to pay much more attention to how could we take this, product to market? What would that mean in various jurisdictions? And, there's various different regulatory bodies that govern or regulate these, this space, the industry, and looking at from a US perspective, when we started looking into this and made the decision, that was essentially about almost a year now that we started looking into the feasibility of this. And, a year ago is not where, from a US perspective, it's not where it is today. It's, even though we thought things were clearing up with, the XRP win, it seemed like it was a clear path, and then Coinbase and all of those things. But up until recently, especially the start of the year, which was kind of to be expected, but we didn't know if they were going to actually do it, but they would crack down on effectively everything that would be kind of DeFi and on-chain and all of those things. And we thought that would have been kind of one path, but they're also kind of hitting hard in other areas, whether it's, for various different reasons, but, Robinhood being one of them, Block got something as well, but that's kind of from a compliance perspective. All this to say, for the American market, the problem is not for lack of intent on our part. The problem is more, in line with, even though we crossed the line, there's no guarantees with regards to, because there's just so much lack of clarity. We could think that we're doing the things the right way, but, fundamentally without clarity, you just don't know. So, so at which point we started, at least myself, I started considering expediting kind of the go-to market in other jurisdictions that felt, there was way more clarity, much more structured, much more kind of willingness to actually regulate the space. And these jurisdictions are amongst, a few, but one of them would be obviously the European Union or European Economic Area, and Dubai, which is why I went in those two places. And so is it going to, ultimately, we're not the only one. Like, I'm not just speaking for myself and for us as Embr, but speaking with, any project that is half serious, or company that is half serious, that wants to do things legitimately, without fear of being, in trouble. Like, it's just a consensus, everybody's going away. That is it. So, ultimately, if I, if I'd be in your shoes as a community member, and you'd be hearing me saying, well, you know what? We don't really care. We're just going to go for it anyway. I'd be concerned.
Mhm.
I'd be concerned, in the management and saying, hey, you guys are not like really like paying attention.
Mhm.
Like this is no good. Like yeah, at least for now, I should put things on hold. Like this is not looking good. So for us to like come and explain this very transparently and saying, hey, you know what? Based on the information that we have and wanting us to actually be in market with something we think will have, significant impact, like we want to do it in a market that want to work with us, that are welcoming from a regulatory perspective and everything. So I think, the way I see it, this is good news, and that we're putting in motion everything that is required to actually be regulated and compliant and have the right licenses in various different markets. This is really, really good news. Now, when it comes to will there be delays? Yes, of course there will be delays. That wasn't in the short-term plan, but we're trying to move as fast as possible. And yeah, that means that a lot of our vendors, if, from a infrastructure or stack perspective, we had, commercials with them, from a US perspective, and now we're no longer wanting to have these relationship with the US one. We're kind of, transferring most of these relationships in the European market. That also means that some of them do not service that market. So we have to find new vendors, think about, flows and et cetera. So yeah, I mean, there are delays, but ultimately what has been shared so far include those delays. So there's no new delays that I haven't, shared with you, currently. So ultimately the information you have includes those added delays.
Yeah, if you want to build a house, and you have a choice between continuing a house on sands that are constantly shifting or building it on a nice, steady, ground, even if you have to double back slightly, it's probably better to build it on the steady ground. In this case, Europe just has a better environment for what we're trying to do. Although it clearly looked like there was an opportunity in the US, ultimately we chose the steady ground. So, for a simple metaphor there. But yeah, moving right along here, I think that was an excellent question. Thank you for the question and the answer, Jason. Moving right along. Is there anything specific that Embr Labs is looking for that would bring a green light to come back to the process of targeting US licenses and US compliance again?
I don't know. To be honest, like the
Mhm.
sad reality is we're just too busy right now really focusing and shifting, from the US to Europe. But this is accompanied by a lot of positive things. You may not, and I know we're asking these questions around Europe. I'm in around US, I'm in Canada, US is, my neighbor, but ultimately there's obviously some Europeans in the crowd, maybe some people from Asia or wherever, but ultimately the sad reality is from a financial infrastructure perspective, especially around banking and payments, the US and Canada are like, we are so behind from an innovation perspective. Like we're stuck in the past. Like if we look at, the European banking infrastructure with instant payment rails and all of, open banking, and if you look at Asia, it's the same thing. There are decades ahead. So for us, from a technological and enablement and experience perspective, there's just so much more we can do. And that's really exciting. So when it comes to the US, I mean, from a macro perspective, everything that we try to launch in the US is decades behind, from an infrastructure. ACH is like slow as hell. So we have to find ways of, like, from a pay by bank perspective, we have to find partners that can do instant ACH, but then that comes with risk. The open banking network doesn't exist in the US, at least that type of approach. So there's just a bunch of things that, if you start looking beyond, like thinking that the US is just the center of the world, which it isn't. It might have been for a while, but is no longer, at the center of, at least from a financial perspective, the infrastructure and everything. Then it gets really exciting. Ultimately, as a company, yes, we do want to service as many people as possible in as many markets as possible. But when you're in an emergent industry, an emergent kind of field, which is labeled as high risk, even though you're trying to do your best and you're putting all of the mechanism in place to reduce these risks as much as possible, then you have, like, at the end of the day, we don't have the means and the energy to constantly be swimming against the current. We have to work with people that want to work with us. We're not a Coinbase where we can, on one side fight the fight and on the other, have, a full team operating, a revenue generating business. Right now we can only afford to be on a path that generates revenue. We can't do both. So we'll leave the fight to others. And then from, like, what are the cues and everything, I think a new administration will help a lot. And then we'll see what comes out of it. If the right people are in place and, it becomes an administration that is crypto friendly, then great. But until there's a new administration, until there are new legislation that get passed, and until kind of there's regulatory clarity, which might take quite some time, I think the sentiment from an industry perspective is that everybody's leaving. And because we're leaving and we're setting up shop elsewhere, it's just an undetermined, type of, TBD, type of return date. And we're just going to, operate elsewhere and be happy about it. And then when the opportunity arises again, then yeah, for sure. But I can't comment on when. It's just, I have no clue.
Yep, that's probably the best way to put it for the time being. But you never know what the future may holds. So it's just a matter of time, if you will. Thank you for that question again, back, and for the answer, Jason. Moving along, I am going to get back to your other questions, back, but I will try to mix it up a little bit. We are halfway through. Oh, this is from Phil. Thank you for this question. We are halfway through the quarter. What would you say have been the achievements through the last month and a half? And what are the objectives for the rest of the quarter?
Well, I mean, like I said, we're firing in every direction, but the focus from a product perspective is exactly what I shared before. So we're dead on, working on on-chain checkout, which, as you know, plugs into something much bigger. And at which point, once we're done with this on-chain checkout and, we're taking it to market, and we have really, really exciting plans for that. In the idea that, because when you think about this product, what's really exciting, and I was speaking with some partners recently that have reached out to us, and from a DeFi perspective, what's really interesting is that these assets, which effectively are the supply side of our product, they are permissionless, meaning that if you think about a traditional business model and you want to set up a store, and you kind of want to source these products from, either manufacturers or wholesalers or everything, there's this supply chain. And this supply chain is, many, many steps. Everybody's taking a cut. You need to get approval. There's contracts, there's minimum orders, there's all of those things that fall in line. And this is just normal business. But when you think about on-chain checkout, it's effectively kind of a whole, like, if you think about it from a user's perspective that wants to leverage this to create kind of their store and start selling these assets, like, for them is getting this wholesale type of approach on thousands of different assets, where there is no commercials involved. There's no, like, to sell this, you need to reach X, and to then do this, etc. Like, there's no commercials with regards to selling. There's like no like inventory. There's nothing like it. So fundamentally, the product is basically revolving around affiliate marketing, and we think this is going to be like very, very impactful on the market. And we see this, being very successful as well. I mean, I don't know, since last AMA that we had, if you've started thinking about it, talking about it to other people, and sounding kind of your surrounding around what they think, what they see in terms of potential for this. And, I'm going to get, maybe, I don't know if Ben wants to jump in, on stage and talk about, we had a meeting this morning, and, and effectively, yeah, I imagine you know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you want to bring him up?
Yeah, so I sent him an invite. I did speak with him earlier. He might be in a situation where he has to be quiet.
Well, he raised his hand, so.
Yeah, I did invite, so we'll have to see if he jumps up. But we do have some plans on that intersection with. Oh, perfect. How you doing, Ben?
Sorry,
coming up.
Sorry, guys. It's 3:00 in the morning, so I can't be too loud.
Yeah, go for it. Building parallel with what I was just saying, how this could have an impact on places where currently there's a lot of, awareness being made, but the conversion from these people that make awareness, like, sometimes it's really hard to track that, conversion and make money out of it.
I've been listening to your show. I've been recording it, sitting on the sidelines. So I've completely missed the first 10 minutes. The last 10 minutes.
I was just making a point around the meeting we had this morning with an outside agency, and we were explaining to them, this next generation on-ramp, which is on-chain checkout, and what this could mean potentially, in the space. And coming from where they're coming, they obviously saw the potential.
Yeah, it was quite an exciting meeting. And again, every time we have these meetings, no matter who it is, if it's a marketer, an influencer, to a ramp, to a project, every single person gets it, and every single person wants it. They even turned around and said, "We will be your first people signing up to this, because it's a huge thing what you're dealing with, and what you're about to solve will change everything." When we mentioned the on-chain checkout as well, they were very excited about that, and how, again, someone can run with it, especially an influencer. And it's just, again, we were talking for about an hour with them, and there's just so much more to keep talking about. There's so many exciting things coming. It's not just one thing, two, three things. A bundle of things where we can generate decent income, and it just keeps going and going. What we're building is something more superior than is out there. We're talking about Binance and how they're doing everything wrong to a certain degree, and how other exchanges are doing certain wrong. What an on-chain checkout will do is pretty much change the game. A project won't have to pay crazy amount of money to get listed on these exchanges. They will just come straight to us, and again, they don't have to spend 50 grand on marketing from those exchanges that are asking for that money just for the marketing, because it's just to market their exchange. That's what it's for. We won't need that. And it's a win-win all around for projects, community, everyone that's in this space. It's just a very exciting time. And once we get these licenses and ship out on-chain checkout, things are really going to start moving quick. I'm literally staying up now till 3:00 in the morning, doing this whole strategy to market, email campaigns and everything like that. And the goal is mega numbers is the goal. I can't go through what I want to achieve because last time I did that, I went a bit overboard. But yeah, the goal is to get so many users to this platform. Every single thing that goes through our clearing protocol. How do we get to these projects? How do we get them listed as soon as possible? Trust. And yeah, we're building everything like that behind the scenes.
One list on Embr. That'll be the question.
All right,
Yeah,
thanks, Ben.
If I do my job right, it should be them all. So,
you're pretty darn good at what you do, Ben. And ironically, kind of the second part of that question asks, what do the senior team members take care of? Jason, Van, Ben, myself, and Curtis. For the most part, we all wear a few different hats, but Curtis is our head of compliance, so he's constantly analyzing the regulatory landscape. He's doing leading the efforts on acquiring licenses, filling out paperwork, seeing what's necessary for us to achieve our goals, hopping at meetings. Van is our CTO, so he's always doing something. We're all doing something, and then I just wear multiple hats. I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of organizing this and that and coordinating with different people. I do a lot of work on the back end with customer support, with automations with customer support, with a whole bunch of stuff. So everyone has their role, everyone tries to help out, and that's the reason we're in the position we're in right now. So yeah, generally either people that aren't really public faced that contribute significantly as well. So it's a legitimate operation, and I think it shows or will show more and more as time goes on. So moving along here, I'm going to go back to a good question from back. Do we know yet how many chains will be supported on-chain checkout, at least at the start?
I mean,
too early to commit.
Well, it's not necessarily that it's too early. It's really more about, we could enable, a bunch, but it's not about kind of enabling and supporting X amount of chain. It's really more about initially, we're just going to test on a few, that's all. And once we feel confident about the various moving parts of making a chain, part of the protocol, and then we will expand to more, and then to more, and then to more, because as you add a new chain, you add complexity in terms of direction or replenishment or liquidity or pathways, and so it's all of those things that we need to be mindful. And the goal is, as we add more and more and more, we create this kind of payment network that effectively can do any to any. But that starts with one pathway, one replenishment, and then really kind of optimizing everything that we understand from, having it out there, and then, putting pressure on it, and then starting to forecast potential, demand and pressure. And so there are, nobody's done this before. Nobody has done this before. If you look at what we've done, it's kind of, because everything that is from an interoperability perspective, there is the part where, hey, someone comes in, there's an order for this, and the output needs to be that, and here are all of the various different steps into kind of concluding this transaction. And then there are different parties that are involved, both on the output of this transaction and on the input. If it's a traditional bridge, then we're talking about locking and then wrapping, and or unlocking and burning, or various ways. But the added complexity that we have is that we decided to circumvene the speed issue, is to create this liquid kind of network to quote unquote kind of front a transaction while it's being processed in one chain, and then relay all the information off chain. So there is extreme amounts of coordination as we're kind of doing the work of oracles, we are doing the work of relayers, and on top of that, we are doing also liquidity monitoring, we're doing liquidity replenishment, we're doing kind of all the contract signatures. Like it's huge amounts of kind of coordination and orchestration that a lot of, most of the time these things are outsourced. If someone wants to do kind of a bridge, they'll leverage an oracle that has the business that's already kind of been running at scale. So it's just a plug and play. A lot of what we do is not plug and play. We have to build all of those things around, best practice, but also it needs to be purpose built for our own type of kind of use case, which again, going back to why we did what we did is because pretty much every single thing that is out there is not purpose built for payments. So ultimately, even if we'd want to outsource most of or some of the parts, they don't meet our requirements. So that's it. So it's either we stop and we say this is the end and we just can't do it, or we try to solve this problem. And unfortunately, we've been kind of on the path of solving problems. And luckily, I think we have a smart enough team to figure out these solutions and to implement those at a small enough scale that we can get to market, and then we can figure out how we can scale it later. But a lot of the things that we figure out along the way, it's not like it's nothing like anything I've seen before from an entrepreneurial perspective. When you start building a business, generally speaking, it's like, it's like going to the Lego shop and, you say you want to build this business and it's like, okay, grab this box, all the pieces are in there. And, generally it's pretty straightforward, but this is kind of this Lego box that has a third of it missing the pieces, and you have to engineer these pieces as you go along if you want to build the castle or if you want to build the car or whatever. So it's kind of like that. We see what's on the box and we tell you what's on the box, and it's kind of this beautiful thing that we want to build, but then when we open it and we look at the pieces that are available in the market, they're just not all there. So it's either we say, well, this is the end, and we have a half castle that is not working, or we start engineering pieces. And that's basically what we've been doing. We've been engineering pieces all along.
Yeah. And that's the key, is purpose-built infrastructure for payments. And yeah, it's been an adventure, that's for sure. Thank you for that question. Back. I believe that was back. Yes. So moving along here. Kind of covered that. All right. So actually, that's kind of been answered as well. Sorry, I'm kind of combing through these. Jason gives nice, answers that sometimes answer multiple questions here. As far as competitors, so thank you. This is from Stacks. Good to see you. As far as competitors are concerned, I'm sure word of what's coming has spread. If a competitor were to theoretically arise, is there any way that they would be willing to actually compete with us and accomplish the same goals in a different way? And do we have plans for this?
So how can I answer this? So competition is healthy, and ultimately at the end of the day, yes, we might be early. Yes, we might be innovative. Yes, we might, take a crack at this before others. But the reality is, at some point, there will be many that will be doing this. But fundamentally, I think this is not kind of a winner takes all type of scenario. And the goal here is, from a, how can I say, from a ethos perspective, or at least from a promise perspective, the whole idea of DeFi is to not have duopolies like Visa and MasterCard. That's the whole point. So if we are going to be reproducing duopolies or monopolies, then we're just like, there's no point of doing what we're doing. So fundamentally, the underlying kind of ethos of all of this is that there will be many of us. But like, look at the numbers of the current duopoly, or any other type of massive player in the fintech kind of TradFi space. Like, the numbers are just completely bonkers. Like, the numbers we've been kind of as a whole ecosystem, of DeFi or crypto or even just the market cap of Bitcoin or whatever. I mean, it's just a speck in the sand. Like, as soon as we start like really truly penetrating the TradFi system, like, these are monster numbers, and we don't need to own like it's going to be fine if we just have 2 or 3% of the market, like more than fine for many, many generations of people. Like, this is not like just a small little opportunity. This is a massive opportunity. And it's a massive opportunity, not just for us, for a whole generation of people. And yeah, I mean, we're trying to build like an infrastructure that can be leveraged by many. And yeah, we're trying to like protect it as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we're focusing on us. Like, we're focusing on us. We're not really focusing on others. And when you're in an emergent space, you don't want to be the only one who brings awareness to it. Like, the more we are going to be, the more successful collectively we are going to be. Because I can't, and our team cannot onboard the world onto this. We're going to need to be 20, 30, 40 companies to onboard the world. And as we're onboarding more, we're bringing more awareness. So we're, expanding the pie of what is, an obtainable market. So like, it's all positive. It's just all positive every single direction that you see it. It's all positive. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't sweat like 1 second or 1 minute around like, oh, what if someone comes around? Like, I'm gonna be great. Let me shake your hand and let's tag team and let's fucking go, and let's like really like go for it. Ultimately, they're probably not going to be exactly like us. They're going to target a different segment. They might have a similar underlying infrastructure, or they might have another, approach to it. But fundamentally, we're both on the same team. And the team is to bring people on chain. That's it.
the pie is massive, right? Like, there are opportunities for everyone. And something that, we noted about the on-ramp space was that at a certain point, the problem would be solved. The UX would be so much better for all parties involved that people would have to choose like specializations, and like ramps would have to choose like specializations and kind of start finding their own niche. There's no reason to think that Embr can't coexist with, I know, like Jason said, 30, 40 other companies that are all striving to accomplish the same thing. The beauty is payments is one of the most broadest types of businesses that you can operate in. If money is being transferred from point A to point B for a good, a service, or even just P2P, there are billions of people in the world who qualify as someone in that market. And there's definitely, even the most successful companies in TradFi, might have a single digit, penetration on a specific market. So, there's plenty of room for everyone. And I think that is something that I tend to see quite often. Like, what if there's competition? It's, at the end of the day, there's always going to be competition, and competition is healthy. As Jason said, it keeps us all honest, and it pushes us all more to compete with each other, but also, make each other's products and services even better. So, definitely, an interesting topic, but the answer might be less defensive and more, hey, that's pretty cool. Let's see if there's an angle for synergy. And let's see, that one's kind of been answered. We have another question here. It's kind of a smaller one. How many active developers and coders and engineers would you say are, working on our products at any given time? It's kind of like a multifaceted effort that goes beyond coders, but if you'd like to say anything about that?
Well, there's 2 full-time person, and we do have, people that are coming in and out at certain given moment, but we are looking at expanding the team, as you saw, on LinkedIn. So we have specific objectives that we want to kind of, accomplish, and that requires skill set that are beyond what our current engineers have. And there is going to be more that we need as well in other areas. But yeah, that's basically it. So
Perfect. Thank you for that, and thank you for the question. And this might be a good one to, potentially end it unless we get more questions. When will liquidity staking be released? And will it have any kind of relation to, like, whether it's timing to on-chain checkout?
liquidity staking, you mean like providing liquidity into the protocol? Is that?
Yeah, that was kind of like I would guess is the intended. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's various kind of answers to this, which I don't know exactly what these answers are. I only know what the questions are, and from a questions perspective, the way I see it is, from a business perspective, I have to look at what are the various different models that can be leveraged to supply liquidity in this protocol, but also the underlying kind of requirements for these questions or kind of these business model are going to be, well, how much do I need? Well, this is something I don't know. Like, this is an unknown. So how much liquidity does this protocol need? I have guesses, we have assumptions, and we're running models on assumptions. But, the other part is kind of what are going to be the costs associated with the various models. And these models, if we look at, a lot of, so our system, it's not kind of like, how can I say? So the protocol per se, like, its underlying goal or mission is to be as effective and as fast and as lean as possible. So when you combine kind of all these objectives and you put them in front of an amount, then consequentially, basically this amount, whether it's 5 million, whether it's 100 million, or whether it's $1 billion, if you apply these characteristics, or at least these kind of goals from a kind of a efficacy or whatever for the protocol, then all of these drive the number down, basically, from a time period. So if you want it to be more, faster or etc., then, like, you're not, like, most of these characteristics don't push this number upwards, in the sense that we're always going to need more money. Actually, it's the other way around. So it's more like, if we are successful and we are, creating a fast, efficient, and scalable protocol for payments, then our goal is to drive this number as low as possible. So with this in mind, then you have to ask yourself kind of the following questions, which is, if I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, like, put a number of how much I need, I have to make sure that, and I'm sure you're all sensible person with regards to kind of, you can detach yourself from an emotional, perspective, and put kind of a very rational, hat on. And you have to think, well, let's say hypothetically, and I'll give you an example. Let's say hypothetically, the protocol needs $1 million per chain. And that $1 million, if the protocol is very, very efficient, it's very, very fast, replenishment, and preempting kind of pressure, and uses machine learning and AI to forecast potential downward or upward demand or whatever, then ultimately, and I've said this before, what truly matters here is the replenishment time. So the key metric that we need to figure out is how much time. So let's say if it's $1 million and it's being given the free will of to move between 600,000 and 1.4 million in terms of liquidity, and it can freely move between that without having to be replenished. But if it goes below or close to 600,000, then there needs to be kind of a trigger to replenish that from somewhere else, wherever that somewhere else is, and brought back to kind of the middle threshold, which let's say could be 1 million. Or if it goes upwards to 1.4, then it needs to be brought back down, because ultimately there's just too much liquidity in on that chain. So bottom line, there's two variables that are extremely important, and three. The third one is essentially the underlying kind of business model. But there's how much time does it take to bring the liquidity, if it's down from 1 million to 600,000, how much time does it take us to bring it back to 1 million? And if that time is, let's say, I don't know, 7 seconds, because ultimately from an L2 perspective, we feel pretty confident that from a replenishment perspective, it's going to be around 2 to 7 seconds to replenish, irrelevant of the amount. So if it's down to 100,000 and then we replenish for 900,000 back up to 1 million, it's still going to be 3 seconds, or at the very most 7 seconds. So the point I'm trying to make here is, if you put that in a simulation model and you start thinking about from a scalability perspective, then effectively you need to figure out how much liquidity you need per chain, that range. And that's more kind of a financial kind of model of how less, because what you want is have sufficient amount of money in there that you basically don't replenish it too often, because every time you replenish it, it costs you money. So you want it to freely move with an X amount underlying liquidity. And in some cases you replenish it, but let's say hypothetically, because each chain will be doing credits and debit in real time at high level. Sometimes people are going to be going into that chain, and sometimes people are going to be leaving that chain from a value perspective. So every time someone leaves, it means that there's deposits happening. So that's called a debit that's going into that vault. So it's a plus of a liquidity. And then on the output chain, there's a credit happening. So that's a minus. So all of these pluses and minuses happening in various directions and pathways, that is the complexity, plus the replenishment time. If it's 3 to 7 seconds, that means that at any given moment, basically, that 1 million can be recycled. If it's completely drained to 100,000 and we're replenishing it and it takes 7 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever, then that means that 1 million can be effectively recycled every 3 to 7 seconds. So you do the math. At scale, if you think that your protocol needs $1 billion, then it doesn't actually need 1 billion in liquidity. It needs to be able to process $1 billion, but it can process $1 billion many, many, many times out of deployed $1 million that are being recycled every 3 to 7 seconds. So the final kind of assumption you have to, bring to the table is, once I figure out how much liquidity I need per chain, so let's go back to the original model, it's $1 million, 10 chains, $10 million. If we're able to run a protocol at 10 million because we're recycling it so often and we're basically processing billions of dollars, but only out of 10 million, then if I'm launching basically I would ask you, if you're a normal business owner, and you need kind of a revolving line of credit that is $10 million, which model are you going to take? Are you going to take a model where at perpetuity, you're going to pay out dividends for every single transaction that are occurring through the protocol, or are you just going to loan the money and pay it back? Because ultimately, you're going to make shitloads of money with the protocol, or are you going to ask people to supply liquidity, and are you going to give them at perpetuity kind of money to have fed like thousands of dollars one time? That's a bit insane. So the kind of the math here that we need to figure out is actually how much money we need. And the thing is, we don't know that answer. If it's 10 million, then no, we're not going to give out at perpetuity kind of like a revenue split to these liquidity providers. So we're just not going to launch that product. So we first need to figure out through kind of a small scale. I don't know if I'm still there.
Oh, you're here. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, it's just that my computer went to sleep for a second because I didn't touch my monitor, so I thought I was logged out. But so ultimately, the first step, and sorry because this is a very long answer, but you kind of see the depth of the reasoning and the simulations and all of these things that need to be accounted for. But so the first step is to figure out, like, what is going to be that number? And if that number is 100 million, yes, it makes a lot of sense because I can't loan 100 million bucks. Like, it's not going to happen. So I have to find a sustainable liquid model where there's a reward that is involved in that process. Otherwise, it's just not going to scale. And this is why a lot of those protocols that exist out there, where their incentive or at least their requirement as a protocol is to have the most, it's not necessarily to have to, but like their protocol need to have more money into it for it to function. Contrary to ours, the whole goal is for it to have the least amount of money. Because as we scale this, the goal will be to run this with the kind of the leanest, meanest machine. So I mean, I'd love to have an open conversation about this, but this is a very business-minded type of kind of model. And with that, we kind of and what's really hard here is that we have to spec out every single avenue at scale to figure out what is involved in each. Because we can't just like build this massive liquid staking protocol. And it's massive. Trust me, it's massive. It would cost extreme amounts of money. But then what we would realize is that we create something where kind of as a company, it would give out money forever, like for no good reason. So like it's kind of, again, going back to this elegant kind of sequence of figuring things out. And as we progress and we identify the requirements of the protocol and kind of the pressure that's coming externally and kind of the amount of money that is needed, we will be able to give a better answer. But what I can tell you in the short term is we're looking to secure from a private perspective, we're looking to secure the initial liquidity that is needed for us to figure that out. Figure out how much money we need, and that will lead us into a situation where, are we building this protocol because we need more than 10 million, this liquid staking approach, or maybe we're good, and I don't want to make promises, and that's why we say kind of all of those things are not necessarily hypotheticals, but when we run these models, and if we do end up needing a lot of money, it's going to be a fantastic product because everything we do is very well thought through. It's very much kind of accessible to everyone. And the yields that we want to put in place, like if we do this model of liquid staking, it's fucking fantastic. Like, it's really exciting. But ultimately, you can't build this product if you only need 15 million. It's not going to be scalable because ultimately only 15 million can go in it. Like, only 15 million. Like if you want to build something for everyone at scale, this needs, like from a requirement perspective, it needs to welcome hundreds of millions of dollars, like hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, for it to make sense at scale. Otherwise, it's just going to be like this 10 million kind of fun that rewards only the few. And if you look like at Aave or any of those staking kind of platform where there's like this cap, well, it's done. It, like, only a few people got access to it, and we're going to be paying them in perpetuity for just giving us 10 million. That makes no sense. Hopefully I'm not sounding weird here or like out of bound, but I'm just really putting my rational hat on as a business person, and my responsibility is to figure out what is the best approach for this protocol to scale and to be kind of the leanest, meanest model you can think about, and creating this new financial kind of payment system.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to really elaborate on that because, yeah, the ultimate goal for our original plan, or rather statements surrounding a liquid staking protocol, would have been acquiring liquidity for the Matter One protocol. And at this point, the balance of what's the most efficient way of getting to that point, the math and the philosophy are, they're shifting in the direction that makes the most sense. So yeah, thanks again. I think that is just about perfectly timed. I don't see any more questions. So I want to take a moment to thank everyone here for joining us today. Really good questions. It's been a blast. And keep an eye out for recording. We're going to make sure to get it processed and put up as soon as we are able. Thank you, Jason, for taking the time out to answer these questions, and to everyone who submitted questions. And yeah, thanks again, everyone. We're going to end this for now, but I'll see you guys all around soon. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah.